Mom said, "We changed all the locks on the front door and also the gate code. We no longer trust you." Like she'd just outsmarted me in some family spy movie. I replied, "Noted. Clever, but you forgot one thing." Then I canceled the $200 mortgage I'd still been paying even after they decided my sister deserved the house. 2 days later, they were texting, "We have a problem." Long-time lurker. First-time poster. This happened over the past few years, but just reached its conclusion a few months ago. Buckle up, because this is a wild ride. Names changed for obvious reasons, but everything else is 100% true. I've got documentation for all of it. Sorry for the length, but trust me, you'll want to read every word of this insanity. All right, everyone. This story is going to be incredibly long, but I promise it's worth reading to the very end. The payoff is absolutely nuclear. I'm 31 years old, work as a project manager for a construction company in Denver, Colorado. I make about $95,000 annually, which isn't amazing money, but it's solid and reliable, especially since I don't have kids or a husband draining my bank account every month. I drive a 2019 F-150 that I bought with cash, live in a decent 2-bedroom apartment, and I've always been the responsible, level-headed one in my family. Let me paint you a detailed picture of my family dynamics growing up, because this context is absolutely crucial for understanding how deep this betrayal goes. I'm the older sister by 3 years, and from the moment my sister Jessica was born, I was held to completely different standards and expectations. When I was in high school, I had to maintain a 3.5 GPA minimum to keep my car privileges, work 20 hours a week at a part-time job to pay for my own gas and car insurance, and complete a list of household chores every weekend that included mowing the lawn, cleaning the garage, and doing maintenance work around the house. Meanwhile, Jessica received a brand new Camaro for her 17th birthday. Not used, not leased, but completely paid off and registered in her name, just for doing her best in school with a pathetic 2.8 GPA. She never had a job during high school, never paid for her own gas, never had any real responsibilities or consequences for her actions. When I graduated college with my degree in construction management after 4 years of working part-time and taking out student loans to pay my own way, I received a handshake from my dad and a "We're proud of you, daughter," from my mom. That was it. No celebration, no party, no recognition of the achievement. When Jessica dropped out of community college after exactly 1 semester because the coursework was too stressful and she needed to focus on finding herself, my parents actually threw her a party. They called it a "Finding Your Own Path in Life" celebration and invited extended family members to congratulate her on her brave decision to follow her heart instead of societal expectations. I remember sitting in my apartment that night, eating leftover pizza, and thinking about how backward everything was in my family. Success was ignored. Failure was celebrated. Responsibility was expected from me, but never from her. Jessica is now 28 and has always been what people politely call a free spirit, and what I'd honestly describe as a complete train wreck who thinks her existence alone entitles her to everything she wants. She got pregnant at 20 by some random guy she'd been dating for about 2 months, who completely disappeared the moment she told him the news. Then she somehow managed to get pregnant again at 23 by a different loser who also vanished into thin air when reality and responsibility came knocking. Now she has 2 kids, Braxton, who's 10, and Kylie, who's 7. And she has never held a steady job for more than 8 months in her entire adult life. Every workplace is apparently toxic. Every boss is unreasonable, and she constantly needs flexibility for the children, which basically means she wants to work whenever she feels like it and get paid regardless of her actual contribution or attendance. Here's the thing that really gets under my skin and has been building resentment for years. My parents have always treated Jessica like she could do absolutely no wrong, while simultaneously expecting me to be the family solution to every single problem that arose. Growing up, whenever Jessica wanted something expensive that my parents couldn't afford, they'd drop hints that I should help out since I was doing so well financially and family members support each other. When she had her first kid at 20 and suddenly needed money for baby supplies, cribs, strollers, diapers, and everything else that comes with an unplanned pregnancy, Guess who got the phone call asking for temporary assistance? When her piece of junk car broke down every few months, when she couldn't make her rent payments, when she needed groceries because she'd spent her food stamps on other things, every single time, without exception, they'd call me with some variation of family helps family in times of need. And like an absolute fool who thought she was being a good daughter and sister, I always said yes, every single time, because I genuinely believed that's what you do for family members. I thought that eventually they'd appreciate the sacrifices I was making, acknowledge what I was doing for them, maybe even say thank you once in a while, and show some basic gratitude for the financial support. I was wrong about literally everything. They never saw it as sacrifice or generosity. They saw it as obligation and entitlement. The real mess that would define the next 4 years of my life started about 5 years ago when my parents were facing eviction from their rental house. My dad had been laid off from his warehouse supervisor position and was too proud and stubborn to take anything he considered beneath his status. He'd turned down multiple job offers because they didn't pay enough or weren't management-level positions. My mom worked part-time as a receptionist at a dental office, making about $12,100 per month, but her income wasn't even close to enough to cover their $1,600 monthly rent, let alone utilities, food, and other basic expenses. Jessica was living with them at the time with both of her kids, contributing exactly $0 to household expenses because she claimed she was saving up for her own apartment, and argued that helping with childcare was her financial contribution to the household. This was complete garbage since my mom was actually doing most of the real childcare, while Jessica spent her days sleeping until noon, posting on Instagram and TikTok, and spending her government assistance money on fake eyelashes, cheap designer knockoff clothes, and whatever other nonsense caught her attention that week. That's when I had what I thought at the time was a brilliant solution to everyone's problems. I had excellent credit built up over years of responsible financial behavior, a stable income with regular raises and good job security, and had been pre-approved for a pretty substantial mortgage amount by my bank. Why not buy a house where they could all live comfortably and they could pay me reasonable rent instead of throwing money away to some random landlord every month? I'd build equity in real estate. They'd have long-term housing security and stability, and everyone would benefit from the arrangement. This decision would turn out to be the biggest financial and emotional mistake of my entire adult life. I spent about 3 months seriously house hunting and finally found a really nice 4-bedroom, 2.5-bath house in a solid suburban neighborhood about 20 minutes from downtown. Nothing extravagant or fancy, but it was in an excellent school district for the kids, a safe area with low crime rates, and had a decent-sized yard for them to enjoy. The purchase price was $285,000, and after putting down 20% to avoid PMI, my monthly mortgage payment worked out to exactly $2,100, including property taxes and homeowners insurance. The financial arrangement we agreed on seemed completely straightforward and fair to everyone involved. My dad would contribute $800 monthly, Jessica would pay $700 for her and the 2 kids, and I'd cover the remaining $600 since I'd be the one building equity in the property and benefiting from any future appreciation in home value. It seemed like a reasonable split that took into account everyone's financial situation and contribution to the household. Month 1, we were still in the process of settling in and getting organized. Can you give us just 1 month to get our finances sorted out and figure out our budget? Month 2, Jessica's transmission completely went out, and we had to get that emergency repair taken care of first before she could start making rent payments. Month 3, the kids needed school clothes and supplies for the new semester. Plus, Braxton needed new shoes. We'll definitely start paying our share next month. I'm sure you can see the obvious pattern developing here. 3 months turned into 6 months, which turned into a full year, and I was covering the entire $2,900 mortgage payment every single month, plus all the utilities because they kept forgetting to pay the electric, gas, water, and internet bills. Meanwhile, Jessica's social media presence was a constant stream of shopping hauls, restaurant check-ins, salon appointments, and lifestyle content that clearly showed she had money to spend on non-essential items. Professional photographs with full makeup and hairstyling, new outfits appearing in posts every single week, expensive makeup palettes and beauty products, designer purses and accessories. But somehow, she couldn't manage to scrape together $700 for housing costs. This woman was posting Instagram stories from nail salons literally 3 times per week, getting elaborate manicures and pedicures that cost $80 to $100 each time, but claiming complete poverty whenever the topic of rent came up. But here's what really started to irritate me, and should have been my first major red flag. Jessica began referring to the property as her house when talking to people outside the family, not the house we live in, or Claire's house where we stay, or even the family house. She specifically called it her house on social media posts, to her friends when they came over, to service technicians and delivery drivers, even in conversations with teachers at the kids' school. I distinctly remember one incident where I was there when the mailman came to the door asking if Claire Mitchell lived at this address because there was a package that required a signature. Jessica actually corrected him and said, "No, this is the Johnson residence," and acted like I was some random visitor instead of the person whose name was on the deed and mortgage. After about 6 months of receiving absolutely zero financial contributions toward the mortgage or any other household expenses, I decided to try having a mature adult conversation with my dad about establishing a realistic payment schedule that everyone could stick to. I approached it diplomatically and suggested we could even reduce the amounts if necessary. Maybe $600 from him and $500 from Jessica instead of the original plan. His response was essentially that I was being greedy and unreasonable because I made good money at my job, and family members take care of each other without keeping score or demanding payback. He actually used the word greedy to describe me asking adults to contribute toward housing costs for the house they were living in completely rent-free. But what happened next made everything exponentially worse and should have been my wake-up call to get out immediately. Year 2 of this arrangement is when Jessica really began showing her true character and sense of entitlement. She decided that the house needed extensive updating to match her personal aesthetic and lifestyle preferences. We're talking about wanting to repaint every single room in different colors, replace perfectly functional kitchen appliances with newer stainless steel models, completely renovate both bathrooms with new tiles and fixtures, install new flooring throughout the entire house, and even landscape the backyard according to her vision. When I explained calmly that I wasn't going to fund purely cosmetic renovations for a house I was already paying for entirely by myself, she had what could only be described as a complete emotional meltdown and immediately got my parents involved as her backup and support system. "Claire is being controlling and unreasonable about the house," she complained to them with crocodile tears. "I'm raising 2 children here, and I should have some input and decision-making power about how our living space looks and feels. It affects the kids' well-being and my mental health." Our living space. The house that I had purchased with my credit, that my name was exclusively on the deed for, that I was paying every single expense related to, had suddenly become our living space in her mind. Then came what felt like an endless parade of manufactured emergencies that somehow always required my immediate financial intervention and problem solving. Jessica's car needed 4 new tires because the old ones were unsafe, $800. It's a serious safety issue for the kids. Claire, you wouldn't want something to happen to them because of bad tires, would you? Braxton needed extensive dental work that wasn't fully covered by his Medicaid benefits, $1,200. You wouldn't want your nephew to have permanent dental problems and be embarrassed about his smile, would you? The central air conditioning unit completely failed during the middle of summer, $3,500 for emergency replacement. We absolutely cannot have the children living in a house without air conditioning during this heat wave. The water heater started leaking and needed immediate replacement, $1,100. We can't live without hot water, especially with 2 kids who need daily baths. Every single expense, regardless of how large or small, somehow became my responsibility to handle immediately. And whenever I would hesitate, ask questions about the necessity or cost, or suggest getting multiple quotes, I'd get intense guilt trips about not caring about family, or having more money than you know what to do with, so why are you being stingy? The absolute worst part of this entire dynamic was how Jessica started treating me whenever I'd come over to check on the property or handle maintenance issues. Instead of greeting me like a sister who was making enormous sacrifices for her benefit, she'd immediately present me with a detailed list of maintenance issues and demands, like I was some kind of hired handyman rather than a family member who was subsidizing her entire lifestyle. Oh, perfect timing, Claire. You're here. The kitchen faucet has been dripping for 3 days, and it's really annoying. Also, the back gate is squeaking loudly, and the kids can't open it properly by themselves. And we're running low on groceries again. Can you pick up some stuff at the store on your way over next time? Here's a list of what we need. Never thank you for everything you're doing for us. Never, we really appreciate all your help and support. Never any acknowledgement of the financial sacrifice or genuine gratitude. Just more demands, more expectations, and more items added to my apparently endless to-do list. Then Jessica started dating this complete loser named Connor, who was everything you'd expect from someone she'd be attracted to. This guy was a 30-year-old, unemployed wannabe musician who drove a beat-up Honda Civic with expired registration and spent his entire day smoking marijuana and working on demo tracks for his non-existent music career. A real prize catch who clearly had his life together and would be a great influence on her children. Before I even realized what was happening, Connor was essentially living at the house full-time, using my electricity to power his amateur recording equipment, eating groceries that I was paying for, bringing his equally unemployed and unmotivated friends over to hang out and make noise until 2 or 3 in the morning on weeknights. When I finally objected to this arrangement and suggested that maybe having random people living in my house without my permission wasn't appropriate, Jessica accused me of being judgmental and closed-minded. She claimed that Connor was practically family now, so I needed to accept him and stop being unwelcoming. I tried approaching my parents about establishing some basic boundaries and ground rules for the house, but they consistently and predictably sided with Jessica every single time. They'd tell me with disappointed looks, "She's been through so much hardship as a single mother. You need to be more understanding and supportive of her situation. She's doing her best." More understanding? I was literally funding her entire existence while she treated me like an inconvenience. The moment that fundamentally changed everything and opened my eyes to the reality of my situation happened about 8 months ago. I was over at the house doing routine maintenance work. Apparently, property upkeep was also exclusively my responsibility now, when I accidentally overheard a conversation that made my blood run completely cold. I was in the garage examining some concerning water damage on the ceiling that looked like it might be coming from a roof leak when I heard Jessica talking very loudly on her phone in the kitchen. The window was wide open because it was a nice day, and she wasn't making any effort whatsoever to keep her voice down or maintain privacy. "Girl, I basically own this house now," she was saying enthusiastically to whoever was on the other end of the call. "Claire is way too much of a pushover and people pleaser to ever actually do anything about the situation." My dad looked into it and said, "There's some kind of legal thing called adverse possession, where if you live somewhere long enough and act like you own it, you can claim ownership rights through the court system." Adverse possession, squatter's rights, legal theft of the house I had purchased, financed, and maintained entirely by myself for years. She continued with obvious excitement in her voice. "The best part is that she's so desperate to be seen as the good sister and maintain her reputation that she'll never actually kick us out or take any real action. I've got her personality completely figured out, and I know exactly which buttons to push. Connor thinks we should try to get Claire to put the deed in my name for tax purposes or something like that." My hands were literally trembling as I stood there listening to this conversation. I felt like I was having an out-of-body experience. I mean, realistically, what's she going to do with a big 4-bedroom house anyway? She's probably going to be single forever because what man would want to date a woman who's this obsessed with her family and has no backbone? At least I'm putting the space to good use and creating a loving home for children. Then I heard my mother's voice chiming in from somewhere in the kitchen. "You're absolutely right, sweetheart. Claire has always been too generous and soft-hearted for her own good. This living arrangement is perfect for you and the grandchildren, and she can afford it better than anyone." Exactly. And then Jessica again. "If she ever tries to sell the house or force us to move out, I'll just tell everyone in the family and on social media that she's trying to make her own niece and nephew homeless. She cares way too much about what people think and her reputation to ever risk that kind of public relations disaster. They were literally conspiring to steal my house from me through fraud and manipulation. And they were counting on my character, my love for my niece and nephew, and my concern about my reputation to prevent me from fighting back effectively. I stood there in that garage for probably 20 minutes, just processing the enormous magnitude of what I'd overheard. These weren't just ungrateful family members taking advantage of my generosity. They were calculating predators who viewed me as nothing more than a mark to be exploited for maximum benefit. But instead of confronting them immediately in the heat of anger and emotion, I made a decision to be strategic and methodical about my response. If they wanted to play manipulative games and treat me like an enemy, I was going to make absolutely sure that I won, decisively. Over the next 2 months, I became incredibly methodical and systematic about documenting everything while maintaining the facade of being the same pushover they thought they could manipulate and control forever. First, I spent several weekends pulling together a comprehensive financial analysis of exactly how much money I'd invested in this situation over the past 4 years. The numbers were absolutely staggering and honestly shocking, even to me. Mortgage payments, $2,100 per month for 48 months, some $100,800. Property taxes, $2,800 annually for 4 years, $11,700. Homeowners insurance, $1,400 annually for 4 years, equal $5,600. Utilities when they forgot to pay, approximately $8,400. Major repairs and home improvements, $23,000. Subtotal for house-related expenses, $149,000. But that wasn't even the complete picture of my financial investment. I went through years of credit card statements and bank records to meticulously document all the emergency financial assistance I'd provided to Jessica over the years: car repairs, transmission work, tire replacements, dental work for the kids, school supplies and clothing, groceries when she was short on cash, daycare and after-school program payments, medical bills not covered by insurance, and literally dozens of other miscellaneous expenses. That totaled another $31,000. Grand total, $180,000 that I had given freely to support people who were now actively planning to defraud me out of my home. Since Colorado is a one-party consent state for recording conversations, I started discreetly documenting their ongoing admissions and plans. I got clear recordings of Jessica bragging to her friends about her house and how she had me wrapped around her finger. I recorded my parents discussing how I would never actually do anything because I was too conflict-averse and worried about family harmony. I even captured audio of Connor talking enthusiastically about his plans to move in permanently and set up a professional music studio in my basement. The most damning and infuriating piece of evidence came when I recorded Jessica talking to some guy she'd apparently met on a dating app. "Yeah, I own a beautiful 4-bedroom house in a neighborhood name. My sister helped with the down payment initially, but it's completely mine now. I'm looking for a real man who can appreciate the lifestyle and stability I can offer." Own. She was telling complete strangers that she owned the house that I had purchased, that my name was exclusively on the deed for, and that I was paying every single expense related to. The audacity was breathtaking. I also discovered through casual conversation with my cousin that Jessica had been telling people at Braxton's school that she was a successful real estate investor and that I was her business partner who handled the boring technical financial aspects of her property investment portfolio. She had even volunteered to host a major PTA fundraising event at her house and was planning to charge admission. But the discovery that made me realize I was dealing with actual criminals rather than just ungrateful family members came when I decided to check my credit report and found an inquiry for a home equity line of credit application on my house. Someone had submitted paperwork to borrow $50,000 against my property without my knowledge or consent. The application had been denied because it required my signature as the legal owner, but Jessica had literally attempted to take out a loan secured by a house she had absolutely no legal claim to whatsoever. That's when I fully understood that this situation had moved far beyond ungrateful family members taking advantage of my generosity. I was dealing with people who were actively committing fraud and theft, and who felt completely confident that I was too weak, too family-oriented, and too concerned about my reputation to stop them effectively. I spent several weeks planning my response with the same level of attention to detail and strategic thinking that I bring to managing major construction projects. This was going to require perfect timing, flawless execution, and maximum impact to be truly effective. First, I quietly consulted with a real estate agent to get a current market analysis of the house. The good news was that it had appreciated significantly to approximately $320,000 in value, so at least my investment had grown substantially despite the family drama. I also continued documenting their admissions and criminal planning. I visited the house more frequently, always with my phone discreetly recording conversations. I collected extensive evidence of Jessica repeatedly referring to it as her house, my parents casually discussing squatters' rights and adverse possession, and various conversations about specific strategies to get me to sign over the deed or transfer ownership. But I needed the perfect opportunity to reveal everything in a way that would create maximum impact and completely destroy their credibility with extended family and mutual friends. That perfect opportunity presented itself when Jessica announced on social media that she was throwing a housewarming party to celebrate Connor moving in officially as her live-in boyfriend. A housewarming party, at my house, for her unemployed boyfriend, without consulting me, asking my permission, or even bothering to invite me to the event. The Facebook event page said, "Come celebrate Connor and Jessica in their beautiful home," with multiple professional quality photos of my house posted as the background images. She had invited over 50 people, including all our extended family members, her co-workers, school friends, neighbors, and random acquaintances. The event description talked about touring our home and celebrating this next chapter in our lives together. That's when I knew exactly how I was going to handle this situation and deliver the most devastating revelation possible. On the day of the party, I showed up exactly 30 minutes after the stated start time when the event would be in full swing. Jessica looked genuinely shocked and annoyed to see me, as if I was some uninvited crasher showing up to ruin her special celebration. "Claire, what are you doing here?" she asked with obvious irritation and panic in her voice. "I just wanted to see everyone and maybe share some interesting information," I replied with the calmest, most pleasant tone I could manage. Before she could object or try to redirect the conversation, I grabbed an empty soda bottle from a nearby table and tapped it with a butter knife to get everyone's undivided attention. "Hey everyone, thanks for coming out to celebrate Jessica and Connor," I began with the biggest, most genuine smile I could manage. "Since we're all here together in this beautiful house, I thought it might be educational and interesting to share some fun facts about the property and its history." I pulled out a thick manila folder I'd prepared specifically for this moment, filled with official documents and financial records. "Did you know this house was purchased for exactly $285,000 and the current monthly mortgage payment is $2,100, including taxes and insurance? That's quite a significant financial commitment, right?" I said, scanning the room. I could see confusion and uncertainty spreading across people's faces. Jessica looked like she was starting to have a panic attack. Here's another fascinating fact. Over the past 4 years, the total financial investment in this house has been approximately $180,000. That includes mortgage payments, property taxes, insurance, utilities, maintenance, repairs, improvements, and various emergency expenses. I opened the folder dramatically and began pulling out official documents with flourish. Now, Jessica has been telling people that she owns this house, which is really interesting because I held up the official deed with both hands like I was displaying a trophy. Only my name appears on the legal ownership documents. Claire Mitchell, right there in official black and white lettering. The room went completely silent, except for someone's baby crying softly in the background. "And here's the current mortgage statement, also exclusively in my name. Property tax bills? Yep, those are all mine too. Insurance policy? Mine as well." Jessica tried desperately to interrupt. "Claire, what the heck are you doing? This is completely inappropriate." "I'm just sharing some educational information with your guests," I said cheerfully. "Like this home equity loan application that was submitted without the property owner's knowledge or consent." I held up the paperwork and waved it around. "That's actually called fraud, which is a serious felony crime with potential prison time." My dad stood up aggressively. "Daughter, maybe we should discuss this privately in another room." "No, Dad. I think this is exactly the right venue for this discussion. After all, Jessica invited all these wonderful people to celebrate her house, so they deserve to know the complete truth about who actually owns the property." I turned to address the entire party, my voice projecting clearly across the room. "You see, I've been paying every single expense related to this house for 4 years, while Jessica, Connor, my parents, and her 2 children have lived here completely rent-free. 0 contributions toward mortgage, utilities, maintenance, repairs, or any other costs whatsoever. I started laying documents out on the coffee table like I was presenting evidence in a courtroom trial. Here's 48 months of mortgage payments, every single one paid from my personal bank account. Here are utility bills that I covered when Jessica forgot to handle them. Here are receipts for repairs, improvements, emergency expenses, and even groceries. Every single item, paid by me alone. The room was so quiet you could hear people breathing and shifting uncomfortably. But the really fascinating part, I continued, is these crystal clear audio recordings I have of Jessica telling people she owns this house and discussing specific plans to steal it from me through fraudulent squatters' rights claims. I pulled out my phone and played the high-quality audio of Jessica saying, "I basically own this house now. Claire is way too much of a pushover to ever do anything about the situation." Jessica's face turned completely white, and she looked like she might faint. Several guests were staring at her with obvious disgust and shock. "So, here's what's going to happen right now," I announced with complete authority. "This party is officially over. Everyone who doesn't live here needs to leave my property immediately." Connor stepped forward, trying to look intimidating. "You can't just kick everyone out like this. That's not how parties work." "Actually, I can do exactly that," I replied, my tone razor sharp, "because it's my house, my name on the deed, my mortgage payments, my legal property. Everyone here except my immediate family members is currently trespassing on private property." I held up my phone again. "I have my attorney on speed dial. Anyone who isn't related to me by blood has exactly 5 minutes to leave voluntarily, or I'm making a phone call that will result in police officers arriving to escort you off the premises." People started filing out rapidly. Nobody wanted to get caught up in what was clearly about to become a major family conflict with serious legal implications. Once only family remained, I turned to Jessica with the calmest, steadiest voice I could manage. "You have exactly 30 days to find alternative living arrangements. All of you. That's more generous than the law requires." Jessica completely lost control and started screaming about how I couldn't evict children, how I was destroying the family over money, how she had legal rights as a long-term resident with kids involved. "What specific legal rights would those be?" I asked calmly. "You've never paid anything toward this house. You're not on the deed, not on the mortgage, not on any lease agreement or rental contract. You have the exact same legal standing as any other squatter, and I want you gone." My mother tried her standard guilt trip manipulation approach. "How can you do something this cruel and heartless to your own family?" "The same way you planned to commit fraud and steal my house from me, Mom. The same way you sat in my kitchen and called me a pushover while plotting to rob me blind." That statement ended the conversation immediately. Nobody had anything else to say. That nuclear confrontation happened exactly 6 months ago, and I want to tell you about the absolutely beautiful chain of consequences that followed, like dominoes falling. They didn't move out within the 30-day deadline I'd given them. So I immediately initiated formal eviction proceedings through the court system. It cost me about $2,000 in legal fees and court costs, but it was worth every single penny to see the expression on Jessica's face when the sheriff's deputy served her with official eviction papers at 8 o'clock a.m. on a Saturday morning. During the legal discovery process, I found out that Jessica had been charging Connor $400 per month in rent for living there and keeping that money for herself, while telling me she was too financially strapped to contribute anything toward household expenses. She was literally profiting from my property while simultaneously lying to my face about being broke. They finally vacated the premises after 60 days of legal proceedings, but not before Jessica decided to damage the property out of pure spite and revenge. She deliberately destroyed the carpet in 2 bedrooms by pouring bleach and other chemicals on it, put multiple large holes in various walls throughout the house, scratched obscenities into the hardwood flooring in the main living area, and even poured concrete mix down one of the bathroom drains. The repair cost came to approximately $8,000. I immediately took her to small claims court and won a judgment for the full amount of damages, though I'm realistic about my chances of actually collecting money from someone with no assets, no steady employment history, and a demonstrated pattern of financial irresponsibility. After they moved out and I completed all the necessary repairs, I sold the house for $325,000. After paying off the remaining mortgage balance and covering all the spite damage repairs, I walked away with approximately $65,000 in profit from the entire ordeal. But the real satisfaction and justice came from watching the natural consequences play out in their lives over the following months. Without me subsidizing their entire existence, my family's financial situation collapsed almost immediately. They moved into a cramped two-bedroom apartment that stretched my parents' limited retirement budget to the absolute breaking point. Jessica was forced to get a full-time job at a big-box retail store. Remember, she'd always claimed that type of work was beneath her dignity and that she deserved better opportunities. Connor abandoned Jessica within about 2 months once he realized that the comfortable lifestyle was permanently over, and she'd actually be expecting him to contribute financially to their relationship. Turns out he was only interested in her when she came with free housing, utilities, and groceries. My dad had to come out of retirement at age 67 and take a physically demanding job at a home improvement store because their household income couldn't cover basic living expenses without my monthly contributions. Jessica's car was repossessed when she couldn't make the payments without me constantly bailing her out of financial emergencies every few weeks. But the absolutely perfect karmic justice that made everything worthwhile happened exactly 3 months ago, when Jessica called me crying hysterically and begging for help. Claire, I know I messed up really badly. I know I treated you terribly, and I'm truly sorry for everything, but I desperately need your help right now. The kids really need help, and I don't know what else to do. It turned out that Braxton required emergency dental surgery to address a serious infection that would cost $3,000 total. Their government insurance would only cover about $1,000 of the procedure, leaving them responsible for $2,000 that they simply didn't have and couldn't get approved for through medical financing. I promise on my life that I'll pay you back every single penny, she sobbed desperately into the phone. I have a steady full-time job now, and I've learned my lesson completely. Please. He's in so much pain, and the infection could spread if we don't get this treated immediately. You know what I told her after listening to her complete plea? That sounds like a personal problem. Claire, he's your nephew. How can you say something like that? He's the same nephew you used as emotional blackmail against me for years. Every single time I questioned paying for something, it was always, think about the children. Well, now you get to figure out how to think about the children using your own resources instead of mine. She begged desperately with genuine tears and panic in her voice. She promised to pay me back the entire $180,000 over time with interest. Promised to repair our relationship and never take advantage of me again. Promised she had genuinely learned from her mistakes and would spend the rest of her life making it up to me. I let her finish her complete emotional plea, then said calmly, Jessica, I want you to think back to that conversation you had in my kitchen, where you called me a pushover who you had completely figured out. Remember planning to steal my house through fraud? Remember charging Connor rent to live in my house while telling me you were broke? Remember laughing about manipulating me? Do you remember all of that clearly? Claire, please, I'm literally begging you on my knees. Perfect. Now I want you to delete my number from your phone and never contact me again for any reason. And I hung up immediately. She tried calling back 47 times that same day. I blocked her number permanently after the 5th call. My parents called next, my dad trying the aggressive, anger-fueled approach first. Your nephew needs emergency medical treatment, and you're being petty and vindictive over old grudges, he barked into the phone. I'm being smart and protecting myself financially, I replied evenly. That's something I should have started doing years ago, instead of being a pushover. Then my mother attempted the emotional guilt route. I don't understand how we raised such a heartless, selfish daughter who would let children suffer. You raised me to be a doormat and a people-pleaser who never stood up for herself. Fortunately, I'm capable of learning from my mistakes and changing my behavior patterns. They offered to personally guarantee repayment of everything over time if I would just help with this one medical emergency for my nephew. Even if I believed you would actually follow through and pay me back, which I absolutely don't based on your track record. Why would I want any kind of relationship with people who committed fraud against me and actively planned to steal my house? Last week, Jessica actually showed up at my apartment building looking desperate and disheveled. The security desk called up to my unit, and I told them to escort her off the property immediately and add her name to the permanent list of people who aren't allowed in the building under any circumstances. I heard through my cousin that they ended up borrowing money from one of those predatory payday loan operations at something like 30% annual interest to pay for Braxton's dental work. That debt is going to follow them around for years and make their already terrible financial situation even worse. And me? I sleep better than I have in my entire life. No more constant phone calls asking for a little help. No more guilt trips. No more wondering if my kindness is going to be used against me. I cut them out, permanently, and the peace of mind I've gained is worth more than every dollar they ever stole from me.